Okay, we are live. Hello, I'm Howard Mann, creator of Conscious Shifting, and welcome to Conscious Shifting. Before we get started, a quick warning and disclaimer: conscious shifting and all known side effects will improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health while creating the ideal environment for spiritual awakening and helping you to live the life of your dreams and influence the world in a positive way. So, if that's something that interests you, then you can follow us on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube, and then join us here Wednesday nights, 6 p.m. California time for Conscious Shifting. The best way to communicate with us is through either our daily thought provoking posts, a live or a replay of the live. Simply place your question in the comment box and we will reply from a spiritual perspective, and that will work to the benefit of everyone. So, with that, let's get started. Everybody, take a deep breath way down to the belly button and relax. And another big deep breath and relax. And one more time, big deep breath and relax. All right, so the question of the week is, how do we bring spirituality back to government? The thing is that without spiritually minded people in government, we can't. It's not going to happen. The thing is that spirit has no politics, no race, no gender. These are matters of the ego. But in the human condition, they are things that we deal with. So it really depends on whether people in the government are spiritual or not. And the greater good is spiritual, whereas special interests and control are not. They're actually anti-spiritual. You know, whenever and however we divide people into classifications, we deny spirit. So no matter how good the intention is, what we're going to do is make possible all the evil that exists in the world. Freedom releases spirit, whereas corrupt governments attempt to control it. And God, that reality we call God, created man. Man created government to protect these God-given inalienable rights. We all have them. It's not an authority that belongs to any entity on earth. The fact that you were created out of spirit, you have these rights just by your being. Man created government to protect those rights. It's that simple. Our rights do not come from government, nor does any government have the legal authority. And I mean that when I say that, even though spirituality is beyond all this and beyond what you would call the law, no legal, the opposite is true. Legal authority does not supersede spirit. So no government, no government. I don't care what the government says. No government has the legal authority to decide how, when, or to whom these rights are going to apply. To do so, by definition, is anti-spirit. So unless you have spiritual people within the government and they operate from that perspective, you're not going to have a spiritual government. It's not possible. So to answer your question again, spirit has no politics, race, or gender. Our duty is to see to it that our governments don't either. There's I could take this a little bit further, and we're actually going to get into this in a future live, but there's a veil of darkness that's descended upon the world. And with it, the hearts and minds of many people are shrouded in darkness. The leaders of the world are being led by darkness, and there's a reign of evil as prophesized in just about every major religion on the face of the planet. We are in those times. It's a period of trial and tribulation. It has begun. In these situations, I refer to the Master. Jesus said to forgive them, for they know not what they do. And his suggestion for us in these situations was to simply be a light unto the world. Over 2,000 years ago, Jesus was seen as a threat to the government, and so they persecuted him. Jesus was a light unto the world. That is what Easter is all about, and that is the topic of tonight's live. So the question of the week played very well into that. Let's see who we have in here. I see Tina and Kim and Richard and Cheryl, love, laugh, and be happy, and Trey and Susan and Kathy. And Susan is saying, please say prayers for all of us in Arkansas. I had a devastating tornado on Friday. I heard about that. And today. Been a long few days. I bet. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. The topic of the week is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And this is something that's been debated for over 2,000 years. And the thing is, do you believe that Jesus Christ lived and died on the cross? Do you believe he resurrected 3 days later? And perhaps you're not sure. But that's really what Easter's all about. So why we celebrate it. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is what Easter's about. That's the Easter holiday. And so what actually happened 2,000 years ago? And why do we still celebrate it today? Hey, Ray, how's it going? While there are some variations in the details surrounding the life and death of Jesus Christ, the general account remains the same. Even when you look at documents from people who were not supporters of Jesus, some historians and politicians today, they found some things, archaeologists that is, that substantiate the story as it's been told. They have found sites. And, a lot of people say, oh, this is all a story. These sites don't exist. Well, they found them. They've dug them up. And the names of some of the people, they said these are fictitious characters. The names of some of these people are carved in stone at these sites. So at the very least, we have that. Yeah, Susan, I looked into that, and I stream to YouTube, but for some reason, and I stream to Facebook, but for some reason, on YouTube, you don't see the comments as they're appearing on Facebook. You'll see them if somebody on YouTube comments, but you won't see the ones on Facebook. So if there's any questions, of course, that's one of the reasons I read them out loud, but it's just to let you know where I am in the scroll too. I see both, and I actually can tell that you're on YouTube. I see the symbol, but that's what's going on, and there's nothing I can really do about it. I looked into it. As far as I know, there's no way to make the Facebook comments appear on the YouTube stream. But it is an alternative to Facebook if you're having problems or if anything were to happen in the future. I'm probably going to be posting some of the lives on the website as well. And I'm set up where if I need to, if everything got really crazy, we weren't able to stream on social media platforms, I could stream from the from Be Live, which is what I use, and you could connect online to that. I'd have to give you a code or something, I think, but you could connect on that and watch it. It's another way to do it. But back to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So there's some variations in the details, but in general, the story is probably pretty much the way you've heard it. And documents and artifacts do support that. So Jesus was born over 2,000 years ago, slightly before the end of the BC era. And at about age 30, he began his ministry. About age 33, he was tortured and hung on a cross. And he died on the cross and was placed in a tomb. all of this is generally, at least today, by most, accepted as fact and substantiated by the artifacts and documents and things that they have found. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit dicey for some people. 3 days after dying and being placed in the tomb, Jesus rose from the dead. And I know that's not something that you see every day, is it? The Easter holiday is a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But there are those who deny it. They deny that it happened, and instead they insist that his body was stolen from the tomb. So we'll get into that a little bit here because it is possible to shine some light on the controversy surrounding the resurrection of Jesus. There was a guy by the name of Joseph. They call him Joseph of Arimathea. I never pronounce these things right. Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea, I believe is the way it's pronounced. Now, he was wealthy and he was a righteous man, and he sat on the Sanhedrin, which is like a high council of the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the ones that studied and taught the law, which in those days was the Old Testament. So that's who the Pharisees were. But within the Pharisees, there was the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin was like the high council. These were the high priests. So Joseph of Arimathea was a Sanhedrin, part of the Sanhedrin. He was also a secret supporter of Jesus, which is why he didn't participate in the council's actions against Jesus. Now, upon the death of Jesus, Joseph asked Pilate for the body of Jesus, and Pilate granted him permission. Pilate was he was placed there by Rome, who was controlling the Middle East at the time, along with most of the world. And he was in charge. Pilate was basically all powerful. His word was it. Whatever he said happened. He was the law. And that's different than the Jewish law. There was a little bit of conflict there, but they kind of, Rome was kind of like militarily controlling everything. But the Pharisees were the ones that taught the Jewish law. The Sanhedrin were the high priest within the Jewish religion. So Joseph, one of the Sanhedrin and a secret admirer of Jesus, asked Pilate for the body of Jesus, and it was granted permission. So Joseph and Nicodemus, who was another member of the Sanhedrin, took the body of Jesus down from the cross and put it in Joseph's personal tomb, after which they bound the body of Jesus in linen cloth and spice, which was the way they dealt with the dead. Now, the other high priests were afraid of the disciples of Jesus stealing the body and claiming that Jesus had risen from the grave. So they asked Pilate for help. Pilate granted them his guard and official seal, telling them to make sure that the tomb was as secure as they know how. Now, this is a big deal. This is a major point in all of this, because by Pilate granting him his guard, it was putting the army at the disposal. This is a military guard that was guarding that tomb. And they had the official seal of Pilate, which, I mean, if you, that was it, man. You know, you didn't violate that. And when he told them to make it as secure as they know how, that was a serious order. That was a very serious order. So all of this plays into what we're going to get into here, but it's just a little bit of background so you understand the situation. This wasn't some lightly guarded tomb. This is like, you know, the Marines, the United States Marines guarding something. And the Centurion Guard was very much like the Marines. They don't fail. Not while they're the only way that they won't complete the mission is if they're unable to, and the only way that's going to happen is if they're dead. That's how serious this was. Now, I think he was baptized at 30, and then that's when he started the ministry, and then he taught for 3 years. And yes, Easter is the only holiday that the Bible says to keep holy, the New Testament. So the council then, after getting the help of Pilate to guard the tomb, imprisoned Joseph in a guarded cell with the seal on the door, Pilate's seal. At a later time, the elders returned to the cell. They found the seal was still in place, but Joseph was gone. So you follow that? They put him in the cell. They sealed the door with Pilate's seal. They came back later on. The seal was still there. It hadn't been broken, but Joseph was gone. Later, Joseph told them that Jesus had risen from the grave and freed him. Joseph told them, the high priests, when they asked how he got out of the cell later on, they met up. They said, "How'd you get out of the cell? The seal wasn't broken." And he said that Jesus had risen from the grave and came and freed him. That was his explanation. This was 3 days after Jesus had been placed in the tomb. While this is going on, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and it was open and the body was gone. But the linens were still there, just the way they were. It was just as if the body had just disappeared and the linens just fell right where they were. They weren't disturbed, other than there was no body in them anymore. They were still all wrapped up, just like they'd left. Now, Mary then claims that Jesus appeared to her. Later, all of the apostles would claim that Jesus appeared to them. And later on still, I mean, this is all within days or weeks of him rising. There were thousands of people that were claiming that he had appeared to them. So the question then becomes, how did this stone get removed? When they put Jesus in the tomb, they rolled this huge boulder in front of the tomb. That's what they used for a door. It's not something that, you just slide out of the way like a modern sliding glass door or something. It wasn't like that at all. It was a huge stone. And so that's one question. How did this stone get moved? And then, with the Roman guards sitting outside, how did this happen? And how did the body disappear? It just vanished, and nothing, and the guards knew nothing about any of this. All of a sudden, it's like this. We don't really have a solid explanation as for, what happened there. Only that these guards, somehow this happened with them at the risk of being put to death for failing their mission. Somehow it happened anyway. So the thing is that the stone was heavy. It would have made noise. And if someone had stolen the body, the guards would have seen that. Now, there are people that have tried to claim that the guards fell asleep. And there's others that say that angels appeared and the guards froze in fright. Either way, the penalty for failure would probably have been death. So this is not something that these guards would have allowed to happen. Just not going to happen. These are professional soldiers and they're not going to fail without, dying in the process. The other thing is that it's not like there only would have been a couple guys kicking back outside this tomb. There would have been a significant number of soldiers to protect against a large attack. I mean, there were 11 apostles at that time. There were 11 left. Judas committed suicide. He hung himself out of, shame for betraying Jesus. But there were 11 apostles left. So there would have had to have been enough soldiers there to guard against that. But furthermore, there would have been hundreds of thousands of Jews who had traveled to Jerusalem for Passover. And some of them would have been followers of Jesus as well. So this Roman guard that would have been placed in front of this tomb would have been a guard capable of dealing with a small riot at the very least. And they wouldn't have fallen asleep. An entire platoon is just going to all doze off at the same time. Professional soldiers with the penalty of death. No, it's just not, it's not believable. Now, as for the body, the Sanhedrin would have found that at all costs. If somebody would have actually, let's just forget about the guards for a minute and say that the apostles or some followers of Jesus or some secret society or something, they got in there and stole the body. Assuming that could have happened, the Sanhedrin would have found it at all costs. No one was going to leave that city. There were all these people there for a Passover. They would have seen something, and the Romans would have been all over it. The Sanhedrin would have been all over it, because the worst thing that could have happened is for Jesus to rise. I mean, the whole point of them putting him to death was to shut him up. So the worst thing that could have happened, I mean, you're talking, the Roman Empire and the high priests and the law within the Jewish community. I mean, they're not going to let this happen. They would have found that body. But the thing is, this is exactly what Jesus prophesied, which is why they could never have allowed it to happen, that he was going to be put to death and that 3 days later he was going to rise. Do you understand the problem? I mean, if that were to happen, it would just rise him up to that of God and expose them for what they were and for what they had done. So there's just no way that this is what would have happened or been allowed to happen. But perhaps the best evidence, even better than all of that, of the resurrection is the change in people's hearts after Jesus' death. Because the apostles, they allowed him to be arrested. They allowed him to be put to death. So, you have to ask yourself, why would they be silent when he was alive? And then, after he was put to death, be willing to be put to death themselves rather than deny that the resurrection had occurred. That's by far the most compelling evidence. Now they're putting their life on the line. Before, they wouldn't even admit that they knew him. When all this crucifixion and all this stuff was going on, wouldn't even admit that they knew him. They distanced themselves from him. They were afraid. And then after he dies, now all of a sudden they're saying, oh no, he came and talked to me. He's the Lord. And they were willing to be put to death rather than recant that. That's serious. That's serious stuff right there. Now, the apostles, and there were others too that weren't apostles, but there were centurion guards, there were historians, there were other people, that Jews and Jesus's followers alike that said that Jesus came and spoke to them. So all of a sudden, after he's dead, you have all these people that went from fearful to fearless. So the followers of Jesus, the way this was supposed to work was they'd silence Jesus. It would stop this stuff. They'd go back to teaching people the way they wanted, and that the followers of Jesus would just go away. Well, it didn't happen that way. That's not how it worked out at all. So the Sanhedrin failed because rather than stopping Jesus, their crucifixion only made him more of an influence than he was before. So, we're back to the resurrection. Something happened. Something happened. Something miraculous. I mean, you have all these people that are just saying this stuff and willing to. Some of them weren't even followers of Jesus when the guy was alive. Some of them were and denied him. Some of them weren't even followers of Jesus. Some of them were deniers of Jesus when he was alive. They said, "No, this guy's a lunatic or a troublemaker or whatever." They even are among people who later said that he visited them and he was God. He did rise from the grave. And they were willing to be persecuted and put to death rather than renounce that. So all these people, I guess the point I'm trying to make is all these people believed that he had risen and that he was something other than a mere man. So, is the resurrection, is that a possibility? I mean, what does science have to say about this? Let's just get out of the whole eyewitness thing for a minute and get out of trying to conclude from what we do know about what happened, and just look at science. Now quantum physics states that energy in the waveform crashing becomes energy in the particle form, which appears to us as solid matter. But in actuality, it's energy and not solid matter. So our physical universe, according to quantum physics, in truth, is an energy universe governed by some kind of intelligence. In other words, if I could put my spin on that, flesh and bone is a manifestation of conscious energy or spirit. Therefore, Jesus' resurrection in the flesh and bone is possible. Just as possible as we're here now. It's a manifestation of spirit in the physical world. It can manifest once, it can manifest 1,000 lifetimes, it can die and remanifest. It's all the same process. Energy transferring from one state to another, from the physical realm to the spiritual realm, back to the physical realm. And there's another possibility too. What if the resurrection wasn't physical? Now, if you understand that physical matter is a manifestation of spirit, then of course the resurrection in physical flesh and bone is possible. But it's also possible that the resurrection wasn't physical, meaning that the resurrection of Christ refers to consciousness itself. And so what I'm saying is that he may have appeared to them, but not, and they may have understood it to be him physically. That's the way they understood it, but it wasn't really physical. It'd be like talking to someone on the other side, so to speak, or getting spiritual messages, or you know, helpful hints from your spirit guides. It would be along those lines, is what I'm saying. Now, remember, Jesus taught that I can of myself do nothing, meaning his physical form. Jesus, the guy. He could do nothing, Jesus, the human. But he also said, as I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. In other words, he was saying that what he did was for the greater good. What he did was act on divine guidance. Just like he was saying that as a mortal being, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm imperfect. But what I do is act on divine guidance, not on my own will. And that's the difference. And so he's entering into this a level of consciousness that is, you could see how that would be able to do things that normal states of consciousness would not. And so if you understand that everything in the physical world is a manifestation of conscious energy guided by spirit, if you were completely identified with that, you'd be able to manipulate reality in an instant, because you don't have any false beliefs about it. In fact, you are it. And so it just is whatever you are. You know what I mean? It's not like you haven't confused the issue. You don't think that there's this physical realm and all this stuff outside of you. And so connected, such a high level of consciousness that there's no difference between the inside and outside world. If you were to hold that level of consciousness, then there's nothing you couldn't do. Just throwing it out there, something to think about. Trey says creation and resurrection energy. Exactly. Exactly. So when Jesus said that, when he said, I of myself do nothing, he wasn't, and when he said, but not by my own will, but by the will of the Father who sent me, he wasn't talking about his human father. He was referring to God, the great spirit, supreme consciousness. So, if you understand that everything comes from that common source, then anything is possible from that source. All of this is here because of it. It all comes from it. It's all emanating from it. So it's not a stretch at all to see where, things could be different if that's what was being emanated from that consciousness. If you follow, like spirit is guiding energy into manifesting everything that's in our physical reality. So it's not that all of this is happening outside of that. There people think that there's this spiritual realm and there's this physical realm and that they're separate. They're not. It's one and the same. There is no difference. We perceive it differently. We perceive it differently. Jesus was teaching us not to work from the ego or lower consciousness, but through higher consciousness or spirit. And that's how all righteous things are done. It's possible for you to resurrect from the grave, right? If you manifested as flesh and bone, if your soul manifested as flesh and bone in this incarnation, then why wouldn't you be able to do it again? But I'll throw this out there too, because, all these things are possible in higher consciousness. All of this is in fact happening. I mean, we're here, we're having this conversation. So obviously it's real, but it's It's all within, all of this is happening within spirit. There is nothing outside of spirit. But then in the physical world, it is sometimes like we're living something separate. And that's our problem. We believe that it's separate. We believe that we have separated from God and that we're separate from each other. That's really our big problem. But in the physical sense, dead, or on a lower level, I should say, dead can mean different things. Spiritually dead or spiritually unconscious, for example. So what I'm saying is resurrecting the dead could be a matter of becoming spiritually conscious, whereas before you were not. Jesus taught us how to overcome the world. And he showed us by example what the cross represents. The cross represents ascension. It was the ultimate thing in the physical world representing mortality, death. And it was used as a tool of the powers that be as punishment for not following their rules. And it was meant to scare you in this physical death business. It was meant to keep people in control. But Jesus took that same that same symbol, the cross, and turned it into something completely different. Rather than being this horrific end, he turned it into ascension, a beautiful beginning. Ascension into Christ consciousness, which is something not, there's a difference between Jesus the man and Christ. Christ is a level of consciousness that Jesus the man operated from in trying to teach us how to do the same. So that's he taught us how to overcome the world in using the cross, which was symbolic of control and death, as something to liberate us and as ascension. So again, becoming the Christ doesn't refer to a person, but rather a level of consciousness. And he was showing us how you do that. The spiritual journey is really a journey home, back to God consciousness or spirit. We've never really left, but we believe we have. That's the problem. We could be here in a physical realm, living a physical life and doing all the stuff that we do, and it would be a completely different place if we operated from a spiritual perspective. In the human condition, there's this process, this spiritual journey, returning home. It's a process of dying and resurrecting into higher consciousness, which is represented by the cross. Each time bringing us closer to the truth, closer to God. Did Jesus, let me see if I missed anything here. Right, the greater good. How awesome would the world be? It would be heaven on earth. Now remember something else. As long as we're talking about that, remember something else that Jesus said. These things when people ask about his miracles, however you believe, whatever it was he performed, the people then believed he was performing miracles. And he told them that these things I do, you too shall do, and even greater. I can tell you that what he was talking about was he saw that we were going to be the ones that were going to create heaven on earth, or what you would call heaven on earth. As we rise in consciousness, become more closely aligned with spirit and less physical, the reality that we're manifesting is going to shift accordingly. That's what he was talking about. But did Jesus resurrect physically, or was it like a spiritual resurrection? In other words, was he talking to people as a spirit or as a physical Did he actually reincarnate in flesh and bone? It doesn't really make that much difference, does it, though? I mean, you could believe whatever you want, but either way, either way, something miraculous happened. In fact, the energy of Jesus is actually stronger today than it was 2,000 years ago. Now, I know there's a lot going on in the world. There was a lot going on then, too. You know, there was. But in that, something happened. A miracle happened. And it's going to happen again and on a larger scale. He showed us how to do it. He showed us how what to do, how to do it. Not everyone will get it because not everybody's ready. Eventually everyone will, but right now not everybody is. But at the same time, you can be, and you can set the example as Jesus did. You can resurrect yourself. Metaphorically, you can move the stone enclosing your tomb and rise. You can die on your cross and resurrect into higher consciousness. You can ascend in the higher consciousness and brings God's light into the physical realm. You can bring heaven to earth. And that's really what we're celebrating. So happy Easter, everybody. We'll do a healing circle tonight. Let's see if there's any last minute questions here before we do. Kim says its spirit looks just like the person. At least that's been my experience. It can. You know, people will interpret things, interpret energy differently, but it can, a spirit can appear as a physical form, even though it's not in physical form. That is possible. I'm saying it's possible for a spirit to incarnate in flesh and bone. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here. So that is possible. But it's also possible to have the appearance of a person that we might recognize, have the physical features, but still be in a spirit, not a flesh and bone. And sometimes it's an awareness. I'm aware of beings around me. And sometimes I know who they are, sometimes I don't. But there's you know, they can, you can get little what's the best way to describe it? Just like little whispers in your ear, so to speak. Information that you get, and you know sometimes where that's coming from. You recognize it because it comes to you in a way that is someone you recognize. One time my grandmother, well, she did it all the time. That you know how it is when there's somebody you're close to and they touch you, and even if you didn't have your eyes open and you didn't know they were there, you would know it was them because there's a certain energy or vibe to them. I was very close to my grandmother and she passed, and I was upset about it, naturally. And I was in the room by myself, and all of a sudden, I felt her put her hand on my shoulder, and I knew it was her. I couldn't see, but I knew. I turned around expecting to see her. I mean, it was just like she was there. I didn't see her. So they can, the thing is that spiritual energy or consciousness can appear physical, can appear of having the appearance of physical, or it can just simply be there, and in other ways, either through messages or dreams or a touch, and and so I'm suggesting that I wouldn't rule out that because these people said that he appeared in the physical, so I wouldn't rule that out. But whether you believe that or not, I'm trying to bridge to people that can't accept that. That's okay. Just know that an eternal spirit, which we all are, there's no beginning and end. So death isn't the end of it at all. And that's what I'm suggesting to them, is that even though the physical body expired on Jesus's physical body expired on the cross, and if it's too much for them to accept the possibility that he came back physically, maybe they can accept the possibility that he was still communicating with people. Because either that or they're all lunatics. I mean, these people were willing to be put to death rather than recant what they had said was that Jesus came and talked to them, right? Trey says, continue to live in the light and be the light for everyone. Exactly. You're welcome, Cheryl. Yes, happy Easter. All right, so let's move on to a healing circle. Let me get this up. There we go. All right. You guys know what to do. Gather around. Comfortable upright position. Join hands. Now, some of you feel that. You're not in the room where I'm broadcasting from, but do you feel that? We're all in separate places, but some of you I know are aware that we're holding hands. That's why I say form a circle and join hands, because it brings us together energetically or spiritually. All right, so eyes and mouths gently closed, breathing through the nose if you can, down to an area just below your belly button. And then exhale back out through the nose. So a nice deep breath, way down. Inhale peace. And exhale tension. And again, big deep breath. Inhale peace. And exhale tension. Big deep breath. Inhale spirit. And exhale all that is not spirit. How's that one? Okay, continue breathing on your own. And think about Jesus on the cross. What does it represent? Death and resurrection. Overcoming the world. Ascension into the heavens. Ascension into higher consciousness. Ascension into spiritual consciousness. Ascension into Christ consciousness. So visualize Jesus on the cross and then join him. And as we ascend up the cross, we die and are reborn into higher consciousness. So lower versions of the self die so that higher versions of self can be born. And in this way, we learn to overcome the world. So feel consciousness rising. Feel lower consciousness giving way to higher consciousness. Let the lower consciousness, the heavy stuff, fall. You may even feel lighter as it gives way to higher consciousness. So we're letting go of versions of ourselves that are based in an egotistical view of separation and allowing a higher view, a spiritual view of inclusion to come over us, moving closer and closer to spirit. So feel the ascension up the cross into Christ consciousness, back to awareness of spirit and oneness. And then we become beacons of light onto the world. So let's just sit with that for about a minute and then we'll continue. Okay, everybody feeling good? How was that one? Hanging with Jesus, literally. Okay, so divine light flowing through us and unto the world on earth as it is in heaven. And so it is. Slowly open your eyes. And I believe that's it. Unless there's a last minute question. So wishing everybody a happy Easter. And we'll see you next week. We'll continue. I had some stuff planned for this year. Susan says that it felt like she was floating. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you see the when you let go, it really is the physical world and all of the trouble and turmoil and tension and stress actually feels heavy. You don't notice it until you start letting it go. And then you realize how much lighter you feel. And it can be a sensation of floating or rising in consciousness. You can actually feel it happening. And that's actually symbolic of the cross. You know, the physical world rises up the cross, up into the heavens. And we could take it a step further, and that is to bridge and then let that flow into the world. So again, the symbol of the cross. You guys like that? Good. Kim's reminding everybody to drink a glass of water. Stay hydrated when you're doing energy work. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're all quite welcome. Hi, Billy. Susan says she needed this tonight. Good. Then you were meant to be here. Cheryl says she felt the love, light of spirit. Awesome. Kim says, what did they call Easter before it was called Easter? Well, things kind of changed. Before the resurrection, you had the Jewish religion, and they had what they would call Passover. That's why I was saying, when I was talking about it, that there would have been, thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps more people that had come to Jerusalem. They do it every year for Passover. In fact, it is the holy spot for the three major religions of the world. For some reason, there's as much war as there's been between them. In that place, they all get along and they each have a temple there. It is the most sacred of sacred ground. All three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, that is where it all started, and that is holy ground. But the Jewish community had Passover. Now, Jesus was born a Jew, and but once he taught, was crucified, and resurrected, that's when Christianity started. And so when exactly we started calling it Easter, I'm not sure, but it's a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. Maybe I'll look into that. It makes me wonder because I may have at one time, I just don't remember the actual historical when they started calling it this, that, or the other. Things kind of evolve over time. But at that point, you had what became Christians, and then there was a New Testament, and the people that rejected that Christ was the Savior. Like Islam and Judaism, they look at Jesus as a great teacher and prophet, but not the Savior that they've been looking for. And so then that's the Jews that accepted Jesus as a Savior became Christians. The Jews that don't see him as the Savior they've been waiting for remain Jews. And then Islam, that has to do with Muhammad. But they're all actually closely related. But in particular, the main temples in Jerusalem, very holy ground. Hi, Donna. Hi, Sue. Sue's University Alive. New Zealand time, 2 p.m. Well, it's 6:57 p.m. here, and it's Wednesday. I think you're Thursday, so you're way ahead of us. But everybody have a happy Easter, and I'll see you next week. I honor the God within you, and remember, until the next time, the only way to bring about the greater good is to be the greater good. Good night.